Hi everyone and welcome back. I am Kirsty and this is Stuck in the Mud. If you've been enjoying my videos and you're finding them helpful, it would be great if you could like the videos, and if you haven't already, why not subscribe, because the more people that subscribe to my channel, the more chance we have of helping as many OCD sufferers as possible. And that is my aim in producing these videos, because I too have suffered from OCD for 40 years of my life, quite a long time. And I don't want anyone to suffer that long. So if we can make a positive impact by providing useful and educational videos for OCD sufferers, that'd be amazing, and we can build an OCD community together. In today's video, I'm talking about the root causes of OCD. And I'm not just talking about biological factors, but I'm also going to be looking at the underlying fears that we have as OCD sufferers. And this is something that I have pondered over a lot over the years, and that's because I've suffered with this for a long time. And I think it's natural as an OCD sufferer that you want to know why it's there. Having OCD is not your fault. It's a horrendous thing to go through, and I understand that because I've suffered from it for a long time. And I've talked in my videos about there being a biological factor for having OCD. I do think we are genetically predisposed, and something in our environment might trigger us into displaying the symptoms of OCD. And it can get progressively worse if we don't actually treat it. I'm not a doctor or a psychiatrist, but there is a communication error there, some kind of neural pathway that's not working correctly. You know, I'm not an expert on this, so don't quote me on this, but something's not quite right. And I read something about there being an inefficient link between the brain system that links our ability to recognize errors and the system that governs our ability to do something about those errors. So this could lead to an overreaction, an overwhelmed or underpowered ability to tell ourselves to stop. So that could be like a compulsion, some kind of ritual. And this was a great quote I read as well, which I will read for you now. It's like our foot is on the brake telling us to stop, but the brake isn't attached to the part of the wheel that can actually stop them. Because we often, as OCD sufferers, know that what we're doing doesn't need to be done or it's ineffective, but we can't help ourselves. We feel like we have to do that ritual, we have to do that compulsion. And there's something in us that just drives us to do it. And we don't feel right unless we do that. And the thing is, we can actually teach our brain a different way, and we might be able to repair these pathways. You know, there isn't actually confirmed evidence that this is how it all works, but there's obviously lots of research and it's not conclusive, but we can actually train our brain to not react in the same way. And maybe that does repair something, I don't know, but it definitely helps, because I am one of those people that has managed to do that. And I know it works by doing therapy, and it takes a lot of commitment. But there is definitely hope to get better, because I find, when I talk to a lot of people with OCD, they feel like it's a life sentence. It's something they're going to have to suffer with for the rest of their lives. And it's just not the case. I know there's going to be different factors with different people, but with OCD and myself, I've got generalized anxiety as well. We can actually do something about those things, and something that will actually help us lead fuller lives, and lives that aren't ruled by OCD and all the restrictions it places on us, and all the fear as well. I also want to talk about those core fears behind OCD and how that can follow us throughout life and we don't even realize it. And it's really about how that's impacted my life and what I have actually come up with, because I've been through this for a long time. It's been there since I was 5 years old. And a lot of experts today talk about, trauma response. And that's not necessarily the case. I don't really know. I'm like I say, I'm not an expert. But do I think that you have to get to the bottom of your core fears to get better? Not necessarily, and I don't believe that is the case. You can get better without doing that. I have on many occasions, when I've been at a really bad place with OCD, I have managed to get better without addressing those root fears. But having said that, I've also come to the conclusion that there are things that have followed me throughout life that I have had, even maybe subconsciously, and I've really hidden all that, and I've managed to kind of just go through life fearing things, and maybe that has in some way affected my OCD over the years. I'm possibly, carrying out rituals, and, it affects different obsessions because of those root fears. So maybe there is something there. I don't know. Like I say, I'm not saying that this is concrete, this is just a lot of my views on it. So for me, what I have begun to understand about my OCD in particular is the fear of death and how that has impacted me. And I wonder how this actually affects a lot of people with OCD, because it really is the ultimate fear of most people, even if you haven't got OCD. But when you have OCD, I think there is a great sense of fear about death and loss. And that is definitely something that I have carried throughout my life since being a very young child. I was very aware of this subject matter. I was, even from being a young girl, and that might be because of the experiences I went through. I only really ever knew one of my grandparents, because one passed away when I was very little, and two grandparents had also passed away before I was even born. So I was very aware of that, and I was also aware of a loss my mum had experienced, and also an accident, a very serious accident that one of my siblings got into. So I was very aware of danger and death, probably at a very, very young age. And I feel that having that knowledge now, it really, I did actually hear this somewhere else as well, from someone else's experience, saying that, to get over their OCD, they had to kind of come to an acceptance with it as well. And I really kind of get that for me personally. Like I say, it's for me personally, not necessarily everyone. But also the fear of loss. I mean, this could carry through to many forms of OCD, because even with when I've gone through harm OCD and POCD, we're fearing that loss of our identity and our moral compass and all those things we have, we hold dear. Those are our core values. And, if something can threaten that, it can feel like it could be a loss, and it's not just a physical loss, but I know I have often, everything that I have had obsessions about has often been to do with death, or, something, some kind of loss, and it's definitely been there, and it's always that ultimate thing with me. So coming to a level of acceptance over it, and I get those intrusions where, this could happen, and, the worst case scenario could happen over this particular scenario, and the worst thing is death. And once I kind of accepted that, and I didn't involve myself anymore after that, they did fade. And that all comes back to my experience with metacognitive therapy. And the thing is, like I say, it's not necessarily important to do any of this background work. It's just because I've suffered with it for a long, long time that it actually made sense with me and resonated with me, that everything stemmed from death and that ultimate fear. And because I've gone through a loss myself very recently, which was my mum, and it's a big loss, because I was very, very close to my mum, and I think it's a very I've had a very good relationship with my mum, and it was one of the things I always feared from being a very young child is losing my mum. And a lot of my obsessions would centre around that as well. And it's been there a long, long time. And although my OCD obsessions, and they've moved around a lot over different things, but I think ultimately everything came back to death and loss. And it really made sense that to me, because it is the ultimate fear. And I do wonder how this carries across to a lot of other OCD subtypes, because obviously they're all different and people experience OCD in many other ways, but these are just my thoughts on it. And it really made sense to me that this could be why I'm not actually getting over it. It just keeps moving around to different things. But once I've come to some kind of level of acceptance, and I'm a very spiritual person, I don't put my views onto anyone else. I do believe in something after death. I've had personal experiences of things I can't explain. It's something I've always often thought about, but since losing my mum, even more so. It's just been the natural thing to think about when you lose someone very dear to you. And it's actually made me look at myself and think, this is something that I've always feared. And when it happened, I thought I couldn't almost carry on anymore, but what surprised me was I actually did. I thought that would be the case, as we often live in the future with OCD, but I actually did. And it actually made me look at myself and think about all the things that I have feared over the years, but I actually, did handle when it actually came to it. And it's not pleasant, I really miss my mum every single day. But it's actually, in some ways, it made me deal with those things kind of head on. And I did things that I didn't think I'd be able to do. Like, I was with my mum as she passed away, and, actually went to visit her afterwards. And, these are things I thought I would never be able to do. And when I kind of viewed death differently and I saw it from a different way, I realised that this is maybe where a lot of my OCD was coming from, and that need to control. Because when we spend our whole lives living from fear, our brain's getting used to that. It knows that, all these things that, these obsessions we have, our brain fears it. And when my brain realised it doesn't have to fear it anymore, it kind of put me at a sense of peace and living from a place of trust and letting things be there and let them be. And that has been transforming for me, because although these are the ultimate things that we have no control over and there's a lot of uncertainty around it, the more I realise that I don't have to fear it all the time. It's that primal fear that we have, and especially when you have OCD, you definitely have, living in that sense of fight or flight constantly. It's exhausting, and it's certainly time consuming. It takes over your whole life. And once I became aware of that, I realised I didn't have to do that. And it communicates to your brain, you're not constantly fearful of that anymore. And this takes some time. It's not like something that can happen overnight. It's just something over a period of time now I have come to a level of acceptance about, and letting it be there. We're changing the way our brain responds to this. So, our brain now doesn't fear it in the same way, because, I've done a lot of research over the subject, and as much as that can feel quite anxiety inducing at first, over time my brain was like, well, this doesn't need to be feared anymore. The more I learnt on the subject, and this is not something I'm suggesting anyone does, but, and I've listened to a lot of people's experiences around NDEs and things like that, near-death experiences. And, I don't believe that is the end. Like I said, I've had personal experiences as well, but aside from that, you know, whether you've had them experiences or not, or believe what your belief system is, because everybody's is different. I'm not a particularly religious person, but I would say that I am quite a spiritual person. But my brain doesn't fear it in the same way, so that means that my OCD isn't the same anymore. It's not, doesn't have the same power over me. You know, I can let those thoughts be there. I don't have to explore, because you've got to be careful with this. And this is something that I would say, you know, I'm not suggesting anybody do the same things that I've done, but with me personally, it's helped me. But this might not be for everyone to do that and, you know, really come to some kind of conclusion. But I am interested in where that fits in around OCD, and where, you know, how it can move across all subtypes of OCD, the fear of death and loss. And it isn't even necessary, I don't believe it is, to get better from OCD, but it has personally helped me. And I think it's important to remember as well that this can become an obsession in itself, and you know, you don't want to run the risk of that happening, because I think when we try and look too deep into our backgrounds and our subconscious behaviour and some subconscious beliefs, we can get, it can just, you know, we can run away with it, and we can get quite obsessive over it, and it's not necessarily the case that we need to do that. It isn't. We can get better without that. I've been better, like I said, many times when I've been at rock bottom, and I've got better without doing any of this background work. This is just something that became of interest to me because I'd had it a long time, and I wondered, you know, what those root causes and root fears were. Like I say, I believe there is a genetic factor there and a biological factor. You know, we're wired a little bit differently, and that's okay. You know, like I say, it's none of our fault that we're going through this, but there is something we can do about it. We can get better. I have got better with the help of metacognitive therapy and medication. I do take medication still to this day. So there is ways to get better, but not necessarily this route. It's important, like I said, to remember not to let this become an obsession, trying to find the root cause of your OCD. So I hope this video has been of interest for you today, and it'd be great if you can share your feedback on this and maybe your own personal feelings around the root causes of OCD and things that may have helped you get better. And you can get better. OCD does not have to be the rest of your life. We can have a life where we're not ruled and we're not restricted by OCD anymore. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.